What's the creepiest thing you've heard someone at your job say? I was checking the voicemail at the dialysis clinic when I opened one morning because sometimes our patients will leave us a message the night before if they know they're going to be late or miss treatment. Sweet elderly patient had left a message that said, "I'm sorry, ladies, I won't make it tomorrow morning. I'm going to see Hazel." Hazel was his wife who passed away 4 years earlier. I immediately called house. No answer. Called his son that was listed as an emergency contact, and he tells me he was just about to call us to let us know his father passed away in the night. His dad had gotten all of his paperwork with his will out of his safe, watered the houseplants, put money for each of his utility payments in labeled envelopes, put on his best suit, shined his dress shoes, left a message for us at the clinic, left a message for his choir director, letting him know he wouldn't need a ride to practice in 2 days. Then he sat down in his recliner and passed. As far as I know, and according to his family, he didn't do or take anything to expedite his exit. He just went to sleep in that recliner. Story 2. When I worked at Ford, there was a dude that walked around showing other coworkers videos of him ducking other women. On my first day, he also kept saying, "If we both had life in prison, I'd duck you." Then kept desperately trying to explain how that's somehow not okay. Dude was weird. Story 3. Make the kid in the corner shut up. Old lady at 3 a.m. as she points to the empty corner. There was no kid. She passed not long after. Honestly, this kind of thing happens a lot. You start seeing ghosts, I'm putting the crash cart in front of your door. Story 4. Open casket funeral. Family gathered and someone seemed out of sorts. She was dressed casually and just kind of meandering about. I observed her for a while. She made her way to the casket and appeared to be giving the deceased some reverence. She then had to pass by me to leave, and she was clearly inebriated and said to me as she was leaving, "I just wanted to see a dead body." Gave me the drunk girl grin and staggered off. She just staggered into a funeral off the street. Who does that? Funeral director. Story 5. I worked at a grocery store when I was 18. My dad had just passed suddenly, and it was my first day back at work after the funeral. This weird guy, coworker, would always go out of his way to talk to me. I was in charge of self-checkout. So he's like, "I heard your dad died." I said, "Yeah." Then he tells me this sick story about how he used to work at a funeral home and would put the dead bodies in positions. I walked away and told my supervisor that it was inappropriate. I don't know, disturbing. I feel like I should mention the fact that the manager decided I talked too much prior to this conversation with coworker, so I was essentially banned from talking with my coworkers. But this dude would make a point of always coming over to where I was just to say stupid crap to me. Story 6. Here is mine. Working on an ambulance 5150 call. Everything is going well till he starts talking to himself. I ask him about a cool demon tattoo. He says that the demon is the one he's talking to. He wants me to hit you before we get to the hospital. But I keep telling him that you seem like a good guy just wanting to help people, and he still wants me to hit you. Story 7. I worked as a lifeguard when I was a teenager. One of my coworkers said verbatim, "The term abuse gets thrown around way too much. If a girl gets drunk at a party and passes out, and some guy ducks her, that's her fault." Never spoke to him again after that. Story 8. I told a manager I'd forgotten to do something, and he sent me a reply saying, "That's okay, because you're going to repay me by wink emoji." He's a 55-year-old man, and I'm 25. Story 9, directed towards me, one of our guys on his smoke break said, "You don't look like you run fast." In the moment I laughed, but as soon as I stepped inside our building, I had the biggest what the heck moment of the year. He was a lean dude, teeth missing the rest orange and brown, with clothes on that a dude with a machete would be wearing in a horror movie. I hadn't even been there 2 weeks. He was a cool guy for the rest of the interactions I've had with him. Never chased me. He just had weird sense of humor. Story 10. Well, I used to work as a maintenance tech in a prison, so I heard a lot of creepy crap. I had a surprising amount of death threats. There was a guy that told me in detail about his crime story 11. I'm a teacher that works at the school that I went to. I've ran into a few creeps at other schools and reported who I've needed to. Students, please talk to trusted adults and we can and will get things done. But the creepiest one I've heard came from the creep's own mouth and was from a teacher that started when I was a junior. I was talking to him in the hallway. He was a liked teacher when I went there and was still there when I came back. I brought up the valedictorian for my class. Him. Yeah, she was nice. None of you knew I was even with her back then. Me. What? Him. Oh yeah, she was a cutie. I reported that crap faster than a gunslinger. Would you believe that one of the senior girls immediately came forward? Ducker probably doesn't like prison. Good. Story 12. I got your number out of the Rolodex. I'm going to text you later. Asked manager at my first fast food job when I was 14. Hey, I remember you said your favorite ice cream was half-baked. I'm in your driveway with 2 spoons. I pulled your address and phone number from the system. Older guy I worked with at the IRS. Want to know why I only hire tiny girls under 21? They're easier to convince to get in my truck. franchise owner at a Little Caesars. Now I look in the cup with my name on it in the souvenir section. There's a present for you. Middle-aged manager at a surf shop on the beach when I was 18. It was a thong and perfume. Story 13. She's going to be fine as hell when she's older. He was talking about our manager's daughter. His weird ass didn't last much longer there. Story 14. Manager commented on my daughter's friend's ass. He also talked about how he could tell which women want to be abused. I was a woman working in automotive, and it was so fun trying to explain to the guys there why more women don't work in automotive. They treat us like we have to put up with their crap or just leave, and I left. Story 15. First day at a new job. I could hit you right now and nobody would find your body until the end of the day. All of this while stabbing his work cart with a screwdriver. Dude got passed up for a promotion and was asked to train the new guy in the same conversation with the boss. He didn't get any better over the years I worked with him. He ended up getting fired for comments like this. Story 16. This customer always flirted with me and always gave me gifts or money, but what really threw me off was him telling me about his new job where he'd be making $100 an hour overseas for a few months and said when he gets back he'll have enough money to buy me. Story 17. Was training a new guy. We were driving by a middle school and he says, "Man, the way these girls dress these days makes it so tempting." I'm like, you mean young adult women, right? Trying to see if I misheard him or something and that he wasn't implying abuse. He didn't help his case by saying that girls in his day didn't dress like that to school. I told my boss, but since it was he said, they just agreed to not put him with me anymore since he made me uncomfortable. He ended up creeping everyone out, but they let him go due to not being able to perform the required tasks in a timely manner. Now he's a school bus driver. Story 18. Worked in a donut shop where we also made custom cakes. Guy calls in asking for a custom cake. I ask him the standard questions. What size would you like? Would you like it to be any particular color, etc.? He says 9 inches and black, and then starts graphically detailing a sex scene. And I quickly realized he was not talking about a cake. Story 19. I had a customer come in and ask what the youngest age was for someone to work there. My boss said that the minimum age requirement was 16. The guy then asked whether or not it mattered if they looked mature enough, or that they could pass for 16. My boss said no. He mentioned his granddaughter was young but could pass for being older. He smirked after, as if to receive approval and agreement from us about his granddaughter. My coworkers and I all exchanged faces of disgust and horror after he left. Story 20. Can I say nothing? Had a customer come up and proceed to pay for an ice cream. He never said a thing, and then I looked up and there was a gun in my face. He just nodded to the other cash register and quietly ran out once he got the money. I had PTSD for a while after that. Anyone who acted off and didn't say anything triggered the shakes in me. Story 21. Paramedic. Had a call years back to a nursing home. Unknown medical. We arrived and none of the staff knew who called. Not unusual. We checked the rooms, located a juvenile male sitting in a room with an elderly sleeping female. He stated quite calmly, "I was going to hit her, the woman, but I called you because you're better." Caught us off guard in a major way. Throughout the whole process, he was extremely calm, cooperative, and polite. Serious psychological issues, recognized the thoughts weren't good and knew 911 was better to assure he got help. He wasn't a visitor. Staff didn't know how he got in or when, but it wasn't a locked unit, so he likely just walked in without anyone noticing or caring. Story 22. I worked at a small retail store with someone I knew for many years through school. They were a part of my friend group and we hung out all the time. Went bowling, to dinner, to parties at friends' houses. This person was always very kind, a bit shy, and hilarious when you got to know them. One day after work, while we were both waiting for our rides as the sun was going down and it was getting dark, they started explaining to me how they believed in aliens. They said that they know they sound crazy, but they know aliens are real. I asked them what made them believe so fiercely. I knew they did psychedelics and such, but wanted to know why they were so adamant. They explained that they had weekly meetings in the forest with the alien. The aliens would shine a light down on them and bring them up to test them and do substances with them. They would be up with the aliens all night and then come back to Earth and pretend it never happened. Even stranger, they claimed their mom also would join them up there, and the aliens didn't speak their language, but they implanted them both with a neurological chip so they could communicate. They also mentioned that the aliens were kind creatures, but they would take over when the time was right. This wasn't the creepiest part to me. The creepiest part to me was the darkness in their eyes when they started explaining, as if they were transported there and were explaining it from memory, like it was real. This person 100% believed what they were stating. I played along as I was feeling a bit scared. I was only 19 at the time, telling them anything was possible, and it sounded like a very interesting experience that they had. After I said that, the light returned to their eyes and they said, "I really appreciate you listening to me." No one usually does with this kind of stuff. Around a month later, they were arrested for attacking their partner and their partner's mother with a hammer. and almost lost them in their apartment because voices told them they had to. Turns out, my longtime friend had paranoid schizophrenia and was completely undiagnosed and untreated. Due to the slow mental health system here, it wasn't caught or treated before the incident occurred. But police did see that there was some sort of mental break happening and got them help. It was so out of character for them to be violent. At first, I didn't believe it. I still have trouble wrapping my mind around it now in my 30s. I still feel bad that I didn't tell anyone at the time. I just thought they were high or fried from the substances. I always thought they were a bit odd, but harmless. I always wonder if I could have stopped the incident from happening, or helped my friend before it went that far. I also wonder if I could have been that victim if I had tried to help. I saw them again about a year later, and they were a shell of themselves, clearly heavily medicated. I think about them often. Story 23. When I was an apprentice, a man walked into the shop asking for a tattoo of something on his upper thigh. He kept staring at me while talking to the artist. He ended up going on this whole thing about how he needed the tattoo because he was being sent to jail soon for harassing and wanted to get a tattoo on his upper thigh so he can say he never touched her because she couldn't say he had a tattoo. He left, and we reported him to the police. The next day, they came down to take a statement from everyone that was present. Story 24. What's wrong, baby girl? The booth just needed fixed, as he had me pinned against the booth and I had now screamed for help. My customers from upstairs and in the theater adjacent from me came running out. Backstory used to work for an adult store, who also had booths in a theater. One day, a guy tried to lure me and pin me once I realized he was lying. He was twice my size. It was the scariest moment I had there. Story 25, sitting on the launch truck during a pilot's final flight, and his family came out to watch him land and taxi in. His wife had their baby sitting off to the side with ear defenders on. There was an airman on the truck trying to be funny and said, "It would be hilarious if that baby got sucked into the intake." Pretty sure that was the only time I ever yelled at anyone out of anger in the AF during my 20 years in. Story 26. An extensive love letter was written by a coworker addressed to me. A particular line of interest was, "I want to pass together with you." This came from a girl who assaulted me and followed me home after work one night, which made it all the more terrifying. She was the daughter of the head of HR, though so she saw no repercussions. I did, however, get written up for unprofessional conduct after yelling at her when she grabbed my junk one too many times. Had to call the police on her a few times to get her to lay off, and thankfully, I don't work there anymore. Story 27. I worked as a patient care technician in a hospital, and I was giving a bath to an aphasiac patient, totally coherent, but can't speak due to a stroke some 10 years back. My badge got caught in her hair as I leaned over her. She all of a sudden said, "Ow." This woman hasn't spoken since her stroke, so we were both very surprised. I looked at her with my mouth open, dumb in astonishment. She was just as shocked, but she knew the message she wanted to get out. "I want to pass," she said quickly, like she's been wanting to say it for a long time. She looked directly into my eyes. "What?" I asked idiotically. "Let me die," she repeated as clear as the first time. "What do you mean?" I asked. There was a long pause, and I saw her face shift to a disappointed frown. She wasn't going to speak again. I told the nurse and charged the nurse. Then I got busy, and soon my shift was over. I came back the next day, and her room was filled with flowers, feel better, balloons, and a bunch of family. Her husband was sitting on her bed, flipping through a photo album and showing pictures of when they were young to the family. I could tell by her face how angry she was. She would not look at them, and I realized that the husband and this family have medical power of attorney over her, so they decide if she lives or not, and they won't listen to her. I look around the room, her IV, her feeding tube, her oxygen, all there to help her live because they want her to. She's done, but they won't let her go, and she's trapped inside her head wanting to rest and be done with the hospital, be done with her long suffering, totally coherent, but unable to decide anything for herself because we can't hear her. I think of that often, and it's a nightmare scenario for me. So scary. Story 28. "I'm not a bad person, just let me show you," yelled the twitchy guy who tried to shut the door to my leasing agent's office. The 4 guys who reopened that door a split second later let him know we didn't believe him. The background check after his rental application that found 28 convictions for crimes, and the current pending charges said that he was not a nice guy at all, scared the crap out of all of us and creeped us out, especially when we realized he was one of more than 30 registered sex offenders living in a 3-block radius. Story 29. I was an auto tech at a dealership, and I was in the service advisor booth talking to one of the writers. A car pulled in, and the woman happened to be yawning. Suddenly I heard, "That's right, open your mouth wide. I've got something to fill it." I looked at the writer and said, "Do you realize that is my wife? I've never seen a 6 feet 2 inches guy shrink so fast in my life." All he did the rest of the day was apologize. Every time I saw him. Story 30. Working a slow shift at a restaurant, so the other servers and I were watching some celeb news show. They had a segment about Sandra Bullock and how she worked at an ice cream shop as a teen and that she was robbed at gunpoint by someone who was never caught. Another server who was the golden boy was marveling and said, "Damn, what if you were the guy who got to say he robbed Sandra Bullock at gunpoint?" Everyone just looked at him in shock, to which he responded, "I'll bet he regrets that he didn't make her take off her clothes." Story 31. I worked at an Abercrombie and Fitch in high school and my freshman year of college. That place was always trying to recruit hunky, jock, preppy, musclehead, football players, or whatever to work there because it fit the aesthetic. I was just some twinky emo kid who just happened to work at the mall and be good with stockrooms and following directions, so I worked there too because I was friends with some of the chicks that worked there. First of all, some of the jock meathead guys I met were super cool, down-to-earth guys. They were not all asshats, but some of them were, and there is this one dude I will never forget. I don't know his name, but I remember his face. He was in a frat. That was his vibe. One day, we are waiting to close and get walked out of the store by the manager, and this guy starts talking. It's me, this girl, Stevie, this other girl, Stacy, and this guy. The girls and I were homies, and this guy was an outsider to us, but he didn't know that. He was new. We were just waiting and talking. All of a sudden, this guy starts talking about this. Him and his buddies beat up in Frat Village over the weekend at one of their frat's parties. He started vividly describing how they really kicked this ass, unprompted, of course. He continues to brag about ducking this up, and as he continues this story, I realize he's basically describing someone that looks and acts like me, a scene, and also motioning to me as in yeah, me and my buddies assaulted for looking like you. Eventually, he tells us that him and his buddies forced this kid to bite the curb and described how was begging them to stop. But they forced him to bite the curb, then curb stomped him and hit all his teeth and left him on the side of the road. The whole time he's telling us this, he's bragging about it and describing how that poor kid begged for his life and also looked like me. It was honestly terrifying. And finally, Stevie, who was the oldest and most mature of the group, finally pipes up and says something like, "That is disgusting. Why on earth would you do that, and why on earth would you admit to it?" The dude kind of shut up, but it didn't really land how disturbing he was being. Then, the manager showed up, walked us out, we closed the store, and I never saw him again. Story 32. I had a patient tell me in graphic detail about how they attempted to assault my coworker who was on night shift the previous night. He had cornered her in a small med room, but she was able to get out, luckily. The detail which he went into, the tone, and the way he spoke just made every fiber of my being stand on edge. He said he was going to do it again that night, and they were meant to be together. He would take them both away the next night. Lots of details I don't want to repeat. Everything he told me, he was not joking in any way. Management hadn't done a single thing about the attempted assault the previous night, and he was in my care that day. Spoke with his attending and got him to the right care floor he needed. Our med cardiac wasn't the right spot for that. I strongly feel that if I hadn't, he would have abused her or worse. I've never felt that way before. I imagine that is our innate, primal fear. My whole body was just screaming with anxiety, danger warnings going off. I'll never forget the way he made me feel when he spoke about it. I'm just happy he wasn't able to hurt anyone. Story 33. My ex-boss said to the girl I was partnered with, if I got to train her, she'd be barefoot and pregnant within 1 week. I'd train her till she cried, till she begged. Story 34. When I was 22, I was working in a bar and had tables to take care of too. Guy, before he left, grabbed my arm, after many drinks gave me $100 tip. Said, "I would love to drink your bathwater and would be honored if I choked on it." Worked at a culinary school a few years later, and a coworker in a different part of the school said, "Your eyes are so beautiful. I want to store them in a mason jar on my desk to look at when I'm feeling down." Those were probably the oddest, creepiest ones from work. Lots of stories about men approaching me with creepy things outside of work too. Story 35, not said, but did. Guy at work took a 12-inch hoagie with him into the work bathroom and locked the door. Emerged 20 minutes later, wiping his mouth. Did he eat it on the toilet? I don't know, but it lives in my head rent-free to this day. Story 36. My first job when I was in high school. Worked as a clerk for dry cleaners, and it was some 80-year-old woman that had a horrible attitude every time she came in. This day, she said she liked my facial hair. Had that been all, I'd have been fine with it. But the tone in which she said it and the look in her eye, as well as the smile she gave me when she did this, made my skin crawl. I went home and shaved it off after work. Story 37. I was GM for a Delco, delivery, carry-out Pizza Hut. The windows were reflective, and at night it looked like there were mirrors all around the dining room. I had just been transferred to this location about a week before, and was trying to feel out my employees and was just having general conversation with them. I was warned about one driver, Richard, that he was hard-headed, a bully, and a racist. Richard was also in his 70s. Richard walked up to me and said that he prefers the windows during the day instead of at night. I asked him why, and he stated that during the day it is easier to walk up behind someone and slit their throat because the window isn't that reflective during the day. I asked him why he would want to cut someone's throat. He said that it might be necessary if someone made him mad by cutting his hours or firing him. He also talked about how he could grab one of the girls when no one was looking and take her into the proofing cabinet, break her neck and abuse her, and that no one would find her until the next morning. I called 911 and the police came out. He stated that it wasn't directed at anyone in particular, so it wasn't a threat, but a joke. He was terminated, and the next day he drove by the restaurant and fired 2 shots at it. Police showed up at his house, and he barricaded himself in the house. He called the store and said if we were to bring him 2 pizzas, he would give up. Cops gave it a try, and after placing the pizzas on his doorstep, he opened the door and grabbed them about 30 minutes later. He said that he was ready to give up. He walked out of the house wearing a full cupcake outfit. Investigating his background, he became a suspect in the abuse of 2 girls. They decided not to retry him on the second count because he was already in his 70s and was given a sentence of life with no parole, and they didn't want to put the victim's family through it again. Story 38. After college, I worked in the tech services at a big box computer store not far from LSU's campus. The first thing it did when you brought in your computer for service was look for your personal adult stash. Before anything they were looking for and copying your adult photo. Photos of your wife on vacation? They had those? You're snapping photos through your neighbor's open window? They had those too. One time they commented that one guy was apparently taking the clothes off of passed out drunk girls at parties. There was photos and video. The 3 guys in the department and their boss deemed it extremely hot. That was my last day there. Story 39. I joined the Navy when I was 16 and sailed for a few years. I'm still on the reserves, but I work as an electrician full-time. I was at work and one of the guys started asking me about the Navy and what sailing was like. As I was telling him some funny sailing stories, another coworker, let's call him Jeff, walked up and joined the conversation. Now Jeff is an odd guy. Everything about him is just extremely awkward and he gives creepy vibes. I have always made a point of saying hi to Jeff because befriending the weird guy is usually a good survival strategy. Anyways, as I'm finishing my story, Jeff excitedly asks me how long I've been in the forces. Then he asks me what kind of guns I know how to shoot. I told him I'm a cook, so I only know how to shoot the Sig Sauer and the C7. He got disappointed and then asked if I was issued my own firearm. I told him you only got issued one if you were active duty, so I did not currently have one. He then told me that he had tried to join the army as a sniper, but was denied for mental health reasons. I shrugged and said that it is understandable that they would have detailed screenings on who joined the military, and I am sure it was nothing personal. He just shook his head and said that it was bullcrap, that he wasn't allowed to go hit people for his country. Then he went on a rant about how hitting humans is no different than hunting animals. He described in great detail what kind of animals he has hunted and the sounds each animal makes after being shot, which would have been messed up enough, but Jeff was filping smiling the whole time. He then showed me a bunch of pictures of his gun collection and delighted in recalling a story about the time his dad had gotten to hit a home invader. I asked to be transferred to a new job site after that. Story 40. I used to work the night shift at a college technology center. Generally, my late nights were just keeping the one lab open in case students wanted to work late night. Buildings closed at 2 a.m., and my office was beside the lab in the basement. One night, every single desktop computer in the lab and office shut down all at once. We weren't scheduled to push any system updates, so I was worried something else was going on when they all restarted and all mirrored each other to bring up WordPad, and text-to-speech started all chanting, "Go home angsty," over and over. I immediately knew it was one of the admins ducking with me, but it scared the hell out of me as it had been hours of dim basement lighting and silence when he did it. Story 41. I worked as a hostess at a restaurant for a while, and I had an old guy ask me if I would go on a date with him. I said, "No, thank you. I have a boyfriend." He said, "Well, you can just dump him, right?" I said, "No, I love him." He then says, "I have money. Does that change your mind?" I said, "No." He finally gave up and said, "You're lost," and left. Another one was, I work at Amazon, and we had like a spirit week. And one of the days was 70s day. So I got like a belly shirt with fluffy arms and some 70s bell-bottoms pants and did my hair all fancy. I was a little insecure, but I was excited and really wanted to go all out because I love Spirit Week. One of the supervisors told me to clean up a spill, to which he proceeded to watch me bend down to clean up. Once I cleaned up everything, he asked me what my husband thought of my outfit. I asked what he meant by that, and he started stuttering and acting all embarrassed. I wasn't sure what he meant, so I clarified by saying, "If you're asking if my husband likes this outfit, that's a stupid question. Of course he likes this outfit. because he's a man with eyes. But I'm not sure if you mean if he's upset that I left the house like this, and if that is the case, what makes you think my husband dictates what I wear outside of the house? Other than that, I don't know what answer you were expecting from asking that question. I never wore those clothes again outside of the house, and he didn't talk to me for 3 months. Story 42. Guys I worked with at a DIY center in the 80s. About young girls. They grass on the field, play ball, and old enough to bleed, old enough to breed. They both later went into law enforcement. Story 43. That ventilator you wanted for testing is ready. The patient won't be needing it anymore. Oh, they're ready to go home. Hey, the funeral home. The jovial nature of the response was off-putting. I hadn't grown into hospital humor yet. The pandemic fixed that. Story 44. Not at the job, but after I quit, one of my managers, both male, made it a point to let me know I was originally hired because the managers wanted eye candy while at work. But they were pleasantly surprised by me, and that's why they tried so hard to keep me and not lose me to another restaurant. Story 45. Guy who came in the 7-Eleven I worked at and screamed at the top of his lungs, "This is a holdup," to which the whole store freezes, and then he laughs and says, "Lighten up." Story 46. I own a bar. It was a busy Friday night, and a dude I didn't know hit on me. After gently turning him down a few times, he got mad. He told me that I'm burning the place to the ground and that he could run it better. The place is running fine, but whatever. It's drunk speak. I tell him that it's time for him to go. He then shoved me and took a swing at my head. I was sober and able to dodge the punch. By the way, I'm a 5-foot-tall woman. Not skinny, but not a big girl either. I don't have a door guy, but my locals take care of me without me asking. 2 of my guys got him to go outside, trying to convince him to leave. He got in as many punches as he can, but my guys pinned him down. They didn't do any harm to him, just pinned him down so he couldn't hurt them. Things changed a bit when he tried to weaponize his keys. He grabbed them and put one between his middle and ring fingers, kind of a makeshift brass knuckle. That changed the game a bit. An arm got loose, and he got really close to stabbing my guy in the eye. My guys were defending themselves, and they got a few punches in while asking him, "Are you done?" He was. He stumbled off, we went back in, locked the door, and never saw him ever again. That may not sound all that creepy, but when you gotta come home and explain that story to your wife, she was definitely creeped out. Story 47. Where are all the hot ladies? Any attractive woman who comes to this department leaves shortly after. The dude would make constant comments about women in our workplace. This one just stands out to me as a "do you not hear yourself" kind of thing. Story 48. Had a dude only last a few weeks. We'll call him Norman. One morning during break, a few of us were in the break room and our boss's office is right there. It's a trailer LMAO. And Norman and our boss were talking about cats. And my boss said, "Yeah, cats can be a pain sometimes." And Norman said, "I was thinking about putting it in sulfuric acid." Norman left the break room and I asked my boss if he had heard what Norman said and replied yes. Told him that homeboy needs to go. It helped that Norman was terrible at the job and I could tell day one that we wouldn't last long anyway. He also did a lot of weird crap, said off the wall things. Definitely an odd dude. Story 49. Definitely not the creepiest thing here, but definitely enough to give pause. Sleep meds are kicking in, so not as flowery as I could tell it. I work in a library at a reference desk. We get a lot of older folks, or people who, for whatever reason, don't have the ability to look up anything on the internet on their own. I answered a call from a man who wanted me to try and look up a specific woman. The only result with the info he gave was a missing person. He says, "Oh, how about," and gives me another woman's name and a little more info. She is also a missing person. I apologize, I can't get him more info than what I've found, and he just laughs and asks if he can have my number instead. Big no from me on that one. Story 50. A group of colleagues and I were joking around about how one of them got a girl's number. The only problem, according to the colleague that got the number, was that she lived out of town, close to a natural park. We were looking at the situation with a positive light, telling him that was great because they could go out for a hike or something nice in the park. Then this one colleague, that's usually quiet and a bit odd, but still tolerable, just randomly says, "And that way, if things don't work out, you can bury her in the woods." We were all silent for a second. One of my colleagues said he didn't know him to be like that. We tried to move on with the conversation, and then the guy says again, "No, but seriously, it would be so easy to do it out in the woods." At that point, we got the feel he was just enjoying the attention of saying something outrageous, like that brought to him, so we started telling him stuff like, "Yeah, obviously the woods are great for getting rid of a body, but the real challenge was to find a good spot in the city, blah blah." Snarky remarks to show him we were not impressed. I liked the guy up to that point, and now I just avoid him whenever he's nearby. Story 51. I was wearing heavy earrings. I work in a toy store. 45-year-old man came up to me, started talking about how he doesn't judge kinky people, but kind of kinky to have them tugging on your ears like that. Again, toy store. Story 52. A man has a video of a female manager doing a drunk strip that he uses to blackmail her. A man told a woman he can't wait for her sister to turn 18 so he can ask her out. He'd had relations with this woman until she turned 21. He's in his 30s. A man bragged about how he got a girl drunk enough to take advantage of her. This is all one job. Story 53. I worked at a snow cone place all through college. A guy I'd never seen before came through the drive-thru, and as I was taking his payment, he said, "You're wearing a hat today. You don't usually do that," which was true. I went in the back and let my coworker finish serving him. Story 54. I'm an architect. We were renovating a big old Victorian on the northwest side of Chicago, and this married couple seemed to be using the renovation to work through their marriage problems, but not in a good way. We got caught in the middle of it. They had money to burn, and the wife was an eye surgeon, but at every opportunity to make changes, she would always opt for the most expensive option. Then, she wanted to import an Italian bricklayer to make an indoor pizza oven, $17,000 more than the common sense option. This was one luxury too far for the husband, and he said, "Well, if you want to pay for that, you better start doing more unnecessary eye surgeries." More unnecessary. Story 55. It's not something anyone said, but what almost happened. I was working at a beauty salon. A guy booked in for a facial, which came with a complimentary shoulder massage. On the booking, he requested that I do it. That made me happy as I felt I was doing well at this new job. On the day, I ended up being very sick, nausea, fever, etc. It was the first time I called in sick to work. My boss owner covered some of my clients for the day and rescheduled the rest. Anyway, when I went back to work, she said that he asked for a HJ as his complimentary massage. She obviously said no, we don't do that. But then he insisted and apparently started saying a lot of weird crap, to which she told him to get out. She got up to leave and he grabbed her and pulled her down. She started screaming, and luckily, a regular male client that often comes in was waiting outside for his appointment, heard her scream and went to help her. What really weirded me out was his request that I do his facial in the booking comments. It really freaked me out. Story 56. I had a guy tell me when I was 18 and working third shift at a hotel, "You remind me of my first wife," while he cornered me when I was setting up breakfast. This was 22 years ago, and aside from the guy who 2 months later said, "Give me the damn money," with a gun pointed at my head, at the same hotel, and just 3 weeks after a regular had passed away in the bathroom overnight and missed his wake-up call. All the same hotel and things I will never forget that were said at work. Story 57. I had someone call my work and ask for me. They told me they wanted my heart. I kept trying to see if they needed an apt or anything, and they just kept repeating themselves. When I said I was going to hang up, thinking that would prompt them to be like joking, they just very calmly said, "That's unfortunate." Story 58. I was 22 working a demolition job in 2004. We were tearing up a jewelry store in a mall, and some cute girls in their early 20s walked by, and we all looked and gave each other the wow look. Then a girl that couldn't have been more. Then 12 walked by, and this one dude is eye-ducking out of her. I see this and say, "Bro, she looks like a kid." He turns to me and says with the sleaziest grin, "If there is grass in the field, play ball." I wanted to deck him right there. Needless to say, the rest of the guys were not cool with this, and he was let go shortly after. Found out soon afterward, he said a 5-year-old girl who was also his niece. I regretted not knocking the crap out of him that day. Story 59. At UPS, we had this guy, Jacob, that was a cylinder short. Knowing what I know now, probably autistic. But this guy was both creepy and pretty rank. He didn't really bathe. The smells off this guy were intense. He also didn't wash his clothes. He was actually a nice guy, but he would give the most absurd responses to everything, with complete sincerity. Anyway, they used to give us these blue grippy gloves, and his had turned this disgusting green color. Because of his weird demeanor, people would joke that he was some sort of witch, warlock. One day someone asked him, "Hey Jacob, why are your gloves green? Is it from all of the souls you're devouring?" And his response was kind of sheepish and surprised, "What?" "No," followed by a short pause and then a quieter, almost to himself, "Souls aren't green." And then he walked off with zero elaboration. Story 60. I'm not creeping on her. I just wanted to ask her something. I hear this at 11 p.m. at night with our very pretty and sweet gas clerk, at 11 p.m. at night by a balding middle-aged man, basically blocking the door for her to head in for the night. Fun fact, a pissed-off 5'9" man can throw a 200-pound man pretty far when he's really pissed off. He tried to run in after her, after being told to leave by myself and another guy. Literally sprinted up. He tried to grab her, and she screamed and ducked. I literally heaved him like a ducking log out the door. He tried to sue me for breaking his nose and arm when he hit the concrete. Yeah, it worked very well compared to an attempted kidnapping case. Story 61. A guy who was an old vet started talking about how 2 cars were drag racing near him late one night on the freeway, and watched as both lost control and crashed into a nearby pole, causing them both to catch on fire. He then started laughing uncontrollably as he mentioned he just drove by and watched. Myself and everyone else listening to this just had a look of concern. Story 62. Tonight's a good night to get an escort. I swear this guy had serial abuser tendencies. We was an older busboy that would walk around the local community college I went to. He wasn't talking classes either. Also, he lived at his parents' house. Story 63. Okay, I was with a sweet gentleman who was passing and he just wanted to be home. He came home and lived near a hospital. He was seeing and naming people he saw who passed in the hospital. His partner couldn't believe it. He kept seeing a baby with me, needless to say. Without details, there was a baby I was with at one point which passed. I went home and cried my eyes out. Story 64. I once worked with a dude who self-published a book of short stories, many of which included predatory old dude-girl storylines. Only coworker I've ever directly told to duck off and never talk to me in those exact words. Story 65. Overnight's manager who had to let me out of the door at night and walk me to my car asked me a ton of creepy stuff. He asked me if I go home to my boyfriend in bed at night. He also called me jailbait, kept emphasizing that he was 10 years older than me, flirting with me, then dropped the bomb that he got arrested for, is getting investigated for abuse. Story 66. I write movies for a living, and way back in 2011, I had a meeting with Rob Cohen, director of OG, Fast and Furious, XIX, Dragonheart, etc. He walks in late, bald, hunchbacked, and ferrety, in a black leather jacket and Joe Pantoliano's sunglasses from The Matrix. In his raspy old biker voice, he starts talking about a female character in my script and says, "I think she's a masochist." I thought to myself, that's actually pretty perceptive, because she chooses to work with a man. She's in love with who doesn't love her back. Then Rob finishes his sentence. "I think she likes to get held down and ducked." And I was like, never mind. He later got busted for abusing Story 67. I currently work at a dealership. An older woman, whose car was in service, walks up to me. She compliments the brand of cars that we sell. She tells me that they're so good that she gave her previous model to her nephew, who then took it to find his ex-fiancée, who tried to hide from him in Vegas. He then, in his life, she did the hand motion, make sure I knew, and the police didn't find his body for like 4 days because it was in some valley in the car. All this information came unprovoked, and once it was over, her husband waved her over because their car was finished. She smiled, told me it was nice talking to me, waved, then left. Story 68. When I was running a recording studio, the guy who lived next door texted me and asked if the landlord allowed us to have camping stoves. The dude had been kind of a pain in the ass neighbor, so I guess I was probably short with him. Told him I didn't know and to contact the landlord. I forget exactly how long it was, but shortly after I arrived to the building and it was surrounded by cops and an ambulance, he had sealed himself in his apartment and gassed himself with Coleman camping stoves. Don't know what happened to his dog. Story 69. Not say exactly, but do. I worked at a cell phone retailer and I had a regular customer. He would tell me all about his son, who was the fire chief in a neighboring town, how he would like to meet me and how nice and perfect for him I would be. I politely declined and explained I lived with my boyfriend. He came back a few days later and said, "I have to confess, I took a picture of you and showed my son. He said, 'You're really hot.' I immediately made him delete the photo while I watched. What the actual heck? Story 70. When I was 14, I started working at a local department store. When he was let go for it, his response was, 'I can't control what a child does.' Story 72. I have a few, but I will share some of the wildest. A lady was with me who had never encountered a deceased person. My patient passed while she was standing there in the house. She asked me if he was passed, and I said yes, he has passed on, and she asked how I knew. The lights flickered off at that moment, and the dogs outside were barking. Story 73. My family owns a hangar, historically old at this point, that was used for medevac or retrieving bodies decades ago, and it currently houses crashed helicopters and planes for investigation purposes. Ever so often, someone will freeze up in the middle of the night, usually the new guys, whilst looking up to the offices dividing the hangar into two. The things we've seen and heard is one thing, but hearing a colleague shriek out, "Something's ducking staring at us," was unnerving, even though I'm already used to it by then. Story 74. Look at you. You're so cute and tiny. I could probably pick you up with one arm and throw you in the trunk of my car, and nobody would know. Absolutely massive guy who came into the Starbucks I worked at. I literally went in the back and refused to come out of the back room until I'd confirmed on security camera that he had entered his vehicle and driven away. My supervisor pulled his image off the security camera and gave it to the 2 sheriff's deputies who hung out in our cafe all day in case he came around again. Story 75. I would hate duck that git. It was in reference to a mildly attractive upper-level manager who was just a terrible person. Story 76. I asked a coworker if he'd switch shifts with me, and he said yes. I wasn't facing him as I said thank you, and he reached over to rub my shoulder and said, "You can thank me by giving me a big kiss." I jumped so hard. He said it as a joke, but I was disgusted. I was 17. He was in his 50s. Story 77. Work in an office. Few people in the team were at lunch. Conversations started normal and lead into people talking about their kids. I don't have kids. One guy took it upon himself to turn the conversation into outwardly calculating, when the women had all conceived each of their children by working backwards from their kids' birthdays. Not the most insane thing ever, but uncomfortable, especially in a workplace. Story 78. I worked at a national ISP a long time ago. A guy working there got in trouble for asking one of his coworkers if the adult scene he was watching during work was the guy's wife. He was really convinced it was her and was sort of challenging him that it wasn't so. The guy being asked got pretty upset. Story 79. Overheard one male telling another, "If a git ain't heading in the direction you want on a date, just slip a little something in her drink." I know a guy. He was fired for stalking and harassment about 2 months later, if you can believe that. Story 80. When I was 18, I worked for my city's parks department. Everything that was said in that room was terrible. There was a guy in his 40s who liked to refer to ketchup and mayonnaise as semen. The news was reported that there was a hit and run of a cyclist, and the driver parked the car in his garage with the dying cyclist stuck in the window. The dude heard this and immediately made a sex joke about the cyclist. Horrible person. Story 81. Had a patient ask me to have an affair with them, politely declined, told the doctor after, had them banned. His wife and kids were in the waiting room when he asked Story 82. One of the girls burped, and one of the guys made a comment how if there's women in the workplace, he should be getting visually pleased. This man is built like a bowling ball, though. Story 83. This may not count because he didn't actually say anything, but I'm a cook in a kitchen, and I once saw a mid-40s male server lean near a younger 20-something hostess and take a deep inhale as if he was smelling her scent, hair. His eyes rolled back in his head as he did it. It was so creepy. Story 84. The hospice house where we did our notes and picked up supplies, didn't see patients, was a funeral home previously. Further, one night a nurse had to go into the house for a late night and on-call situation to pick up supplies, and there was a dead homeless man in the yard. Story 85. A chef at my work told me over my shoulder he wouldn't bother me so much if I didn't come to work looking like such an escort in the cafeteria line where other people overheard. Made my skin crawl. First time I ever reported someone to HR. Story 86. I work nights as an EMT at a really large homeless shelter. Someone said, "There's something in the bed that talks to me at night." And that was pretty spooky, but she's just a nice lady with some mental illness. What is the worst thing you've ever done at work? Story 1. I worked a job right out of college that I had to travel for 300 plus days a year. I got per diem and a company credit card with literally no limit. The company bookkeeper was a mid-40s woman who was an alcoholic and hated her husband and was hell-bent on achieving full cougar status. I proverbially dipped my pen in the company ink not 2 months into employment. For the next 2 years, I kept her happy, and she overlooked the charges to my company credit card, ranging from $200 dinners, hotel suites, adult club. Story 2, I worked at a coffee shop and was used to rude customers, but this one guy seriously took the cake. He deserves what he got. This man placed his order at the speaker, asking for a macchiato. I ask if he means a caramel macchiato, completely different but more popular drink, and he says no. So I give him his total. Eventually he gets to the window, pays, and I hand him his drink, where he proceeds to completely lose his crap. He tells me that this is not the drink he ordered and I'm a complete idiot, etc. Come to find out, he actually wanted the caramel macchiato. This happens often, so I told him we wouldn't charge him the extra and I'd have it rushed out. This isn't good enough for him. He grumbles about deserving to get his money back and the new drink, but I politely excuse myself from the window until the drink is made. My barista finishes the drink and I hand it to him. He grabs it from me and drives forward, but he's not done yet. I'm talking with the next customer when this guy stops his car, gets out, and walks in between her car and my window. He leans in the store and hollers that this still isn't his drink. He wanted it iced. I ask him to come into the front of the store since I can't serve him like this. But no, he'd rather stand in front of this lady. My coffee shop had a policy where we could not say no to a customer. I sometimes wondered if I would be expected to service someone, as long as they asked while I was behind the register. I asked my barista to make the caramel macchiato again, but iced and as fast as freaking possible. I had gone hide from this man again, but he begins yelling, so I come back. Now he's saying that he ordered and paid for a cream cheese muffin. I asked to see his receipt so I can show him that he didn't pay for one, and that we had been out of cream cheese muffins all morning. But he refused to show me his receipt. I'm trying to reprint the previous order, but he's yelling and my manager has made it clear that she's not going to help at all. So I say, duck it, and go to the pastry case and grab whatever kind of muffin we had. Just as my barista hands the new latte to the crazy man, I hurl the muffin through the window and hit him in the chest. It gets muffin all over his shirt and say, "I'll comp it for you." I was actually shocked when he quietly took the muffin and his now third drink and walked back to his car. The lady, who had been sitting stunned in her car the whole time, actually said, "Well done," to me. Story 3. One day I went to work. It was around 8:45 a.m., got on the internet to do some literature search. Then my autopilot kicked in. I don't even know what happened. Next thing I recall is that it was 2 p.m. All the Reddit links on the top 600 hottest links were purple. And the only reason I stopped was to check time because I was hungry. I got paid for the whole day and felt guilty. Went home, ate dinner, slept, and repeated again and again for the next 6 months. Story 4, working in a ticket sales booth at Six Flags. They left me there for 8 hours, despite my having to pee for the last 5 of them. Finally, I peed in the vacuum tube, which takes the money to the counting room. At the end of the day, people were wondering about the tiny droplets on all the canisters. Story 5, I used to work at the Cheesecake Factory, and we have a chicken and shrimp gumbo. One day I had Muslim guests, burqas and all, sit down with me. They explained pretty clearly they can't have anything with alcohol, so no wine sauce or pork. I said sure, no problem. They ordered the chicken and shrimp gumbo, and I was like, okay, cool. That works. Problem is that crap had pork sausage in it, and I completely forgot. It's not called a chicken and shrimp and pork sausage gumbo, so my bad. The lady was halfway through eating it when she asked me what that meat was that she was eating. If she hadn't eaten most of it already, I would have taken it back. But I just lied and said, "Oh, that's beef. You're good." I walked away like pho. Story 6. Hit a guy. Ran out in front of the train I was driving. He probably thought he has time to make it across the tracks. He didn't. This accident happened about 4 years ago. I don't feel responsible for the accident, and I certainly don't blame myself for anything that happened, although I must admit that I suffered a few sleepless nights at first. But thanks to a great network of colleagues, I soon realized that, like most of you have mentioned, it wasn't my fault. Story 7. When I was younger, I was an auditor for a hotel rewards program. Basically, my job was to spot fraud and abuse and prevent it or stop it. My routine consisted of spotting trends, notifying our guests and asking for explanations of their activity, and negotiating penalties with them. Now, I had a woman who I stumbled across by accident, and she was guilty of major fraud, and she was good. She had accumulated around 4 million points through her scheme. I sent her an email and letter asking her to call or email me to discuss her account and put an account freeze so she couldn't use her points. She didn't respond after a week, so I sent her another email and called her, and she promptly hung up on me. This went on for a solid 2 months. She had a trip to Paris booked, and she was planning on using her points for this, which she can't do because her account is frozen. Also, because this is a sister company hotel. They must have the certificate in hand or pay. So she gets there, enjoys her week stay, and it comes time to check out. Well, the hotel wants to be paid. She calls into customer service and pitches a fit, and they can't help her because of the freeze I've placed on her account. The CSR calls me at home, and I come in and call the hotel and finally speak to her. They want to be paid. I need you to overnight a certificate to the hotel. Me, I can't do that. I've suspended your account because you've abused our program. Yes, you can. Look, they want $7,000 or the certificate. Me, I've been trying to contact you for the last 2 months, and you have chosen not to respond to me. We can discuss your account now if you'd like, and we can compromise and I'll talk to the hotel. No, you need to just give them the certificate. I'm not going to discuss anything with you. You should be happy that I'm spending all the time in your hotels. Me, look, it's Saturday morning. I don't want to be in here discussing this with you, and it's not you that's been in our properties. It's been friends and coworkers. You've blatantly abused our program, and it costs us money. Diesman, you don't know who I am. I will be calling the CEO and getting you fired. You're just a ducking loser who thinks he's important. Now you ducking get the certificate here, and maybe I won't get you fired. Me, ma'am, I don't know you, but your threats don't scare me. So here's what's going to happen. I've zeroed out your account. Your guest status has been stripped, and I've closed your account. We do not want your business. Thank you for your time. What? They're going to charge me $7,000. Me, had you been nicer to me and responded to me, we could have settled this. As it is, your attitude has prevented me from being willing to do anything for you. Look, I'm sorry, I don't have $7,000. Me, that's not my problem. Guess this is going to be a $7,000 lesson for you. Hangs up phone, ended up with a presidential complaint, but nothing came of it. Story 8. When I got my first summer job, I had a hard-ass manager who pointed out every minor detail about how the job should be done, and he did this repeatedly over the course of an entire summer, just drilling it into my head. Well, for some reason they liked me and wanted me to come back the following summer, and that manager didn't work there anymore, and the other summer workers was completely new. I was the only one who had been there before. So I actually positioned myself as the manager and ran operations for the entire summer, being just as picky as the previous manager. Funny story is that the regular staff, the ones that was there year-round, didn't mind that I did this. And they came to me and said, "This guy isn't doing anything. Can you go and tell him to do his work?" I didn't even have to say anything. I just walked over there and he started working when I was around. They all flipped at the end of the summer when I reveled that I was just one amongst them and that I didn't ever had any authority over them. And I had been sending people home when they disappointed me, saying that I was gonna dock their pay and stuff like that, which, of course, I couldn't do. Story 9. When I was younger, I worked at a home for deaf people with severe autism. There were 5 residents, and one of them was completely deaf and blind. Coupled with his autism, he didn't have a lot of pleasures in life, other than wearing comfortable hats and necklaces. One of the workers there decided on a whim that it would be a good idea to buy him a very expensive stereo set with a top-of-the-line headset. There were attempts to get him to use it with the idea that he might like the feeling of the bass on his eardrum, but he never took a liking to it, and so it sat in his room year after year. I came back summer after summer, and every time I went in his room, I just saw it lying there collecting dust. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I took the headset home with me. No one ever noticed or cared, but that doesn't change the fact that I stole from a blind, deaf, autistic man with epilepsy and, at the time, a broken jaw. Story 10. I think I got this one. I attended electronics school for the Air Force at Lackland AFB Teaks. I'm considering this my job at the time. Anyhow, I was 20 years old, just out of basic, and I wanted to get drunk, but I was underage, and the dorm was a dry dorm. So this dude down the hall says he's got a bottle of vodka and wants to get tanked also. We get our drink on, kill the bottle, and I head back towards my room. I was at the drunk stage where everything becomes a rail to stand. So I'm leaning on the wall the whole way back to the room, get to my door, and can't open it. I couldn't get my key in it. Directly across from my room door is an open bay bathroom where people are hanging out after hours just shooting the crap. Some kind soul came over, took my keys, opened the door for me, pushes me in and closes the door. I had just gotten a new roommate that day. Due to my party activities, I hadn't met him and he was fast asleep. So I quietly get into bed and the spins start. Eventually I know I'm going to puke. I get out of bed and go for the trash can, next to his laundry bag, bed, and shoes, all shinny and lined up. Needless to say, I end up vomiting all over his stuff, his bed with him in it and everywhere else. Dude doesn't wake up. So now I'm in a panic. This guy's gonna beat my ass. I stumble into the bathroom, grab as many paper towels as I can, then go back to the room to clean it all up. Then I blacked out. The bathroom area was still filled with people, and the account goes something like this. I walked out of my room with all these paper towels covered in vomit, went into a bathroom stall, shoved them in a toilet, flushed it, and it started overflowing. I then walked into the center of the bathroom, pulled down my pants, and started crapting in front of everyone. I woke the next day, went to the bathroom, and was pissing. This dude next to me was pissing and getting about people trashing the bathroom, which we all had to keep clean. I had no recollection and said something like, "It smells like crap in here." Eventually, they called a dorm meeting and talked about the pooping incident. Then they asked if anyone knew. A bunch of people pointed at me, and I still had no idea. A sergeant takes me aside and asks if I had been drinking. I said yay, but I wouldn't do something like that, and how can you prove it? He said that there was a trail of crap from the bathroom to my door. Years later, kids coming through that pipeline school had heard of the incident, the Phantom Crapter. Story 11. I currently work in a large corporate office, and back when I first started several years ago, I didn't know the layout of the building, i.e., the locations of alternate facilities. I had only ever used one restroom during the first few weeks of training. The night before, my wife and I had a big Mexican dinner at a local restaurant. I had to go, badly. I excused myself from the training room and scuttled my way to the bathroom. As I approached, and to my horror, I found it was being cleaned and had the "Do Not Enter" sign out. Duck. At this point, it was everything I could do to keep from crapting my pants. I knew the general location of another restroom, about 200 yards away. So I headed that direction, walking like what I can only imagine looked like a father penguin carrying an egg on its feet. When I finally approached, I was sweating through my shirt and had blurry vision. I pushed the door open, found I had an empty restroom all to myself, and made my way to the middle stall and let loose the dogs of war. This was easily one of the top 3 craps of my life. As I'm sitting there gathering my thoughts, I hear the main door open and, to my surprise, hear several feminine voices chatting about something or another. I wondered what the hell women were doing in the men's room. Yep, I was in the ladies' room. I can honestly say I've never been so terrified in my life. I thought for sure if I got caught, I was getting fired for perving out in the girls' bathroom. I tried to collect myself and proceeded to clean up, putting my feet up so they didn't get suspicious. I had to wait for 20 minutes for an opportunity to escape undetected. I finally did and never told anyone this story. Here goes. Crap 2. I live at the beach in Florida, And one hot summer day, some friends and I were having a beach day. We had been there all day long, and it was about 5 p.m. when I got the urge to go. It was a cheek squeezer for sure. I knew there was no way I could make the trip back to the house in time. So I shuffled out to waist-deep water, untied my shorts, and proceeded to let out a perfectly shaped textbook beach torpedo. It was also a floater. Realizing this, I quickly pulled my pants up and headed back to shore. When I got back to the beach towel, I looked down the coast a bit in the direction of the current and saw a group of kids start yelling and screaming like they had seen a shark. I walked in the direction of the kids and overheard one of them say that they making fun of their fried for getting touched by poop. I turned around and started laughing as I walked back to my friends and shared the story. Crap 1. I will spare all the details of the events leading up to my arrest and begin the scene for crap number 1 taking place in the back of a cop car. I had been drinking a bit at a bar with some friends. Before I ever got in the car, I had to poop. The officer who arrested me was a complete hole. I'm serious. This guy had 0 ducks to give, and he would not listen to my plight. I had to crap. He kept me in the car for over 4 hours, and I could not take it. I keeled over, filled my shorts full of redemption. He got out of the car and started puking. Story 12. At work, we communicate through Skype. There was a coworker I kind of flirted with. We would ask each other questions, and the other person had to answer honestly. I asked the guy whether he had chest hair, but instead of sending it to him, I sent it to my boss. Fortunately, my boss laughed it off and told me to go back to work. I still cringe at the memory. Story 13. When I was a teenager working as a meat packer, I discovered in the meat I was sending to the conveyor belt pieces of metal. The glistening caught my eye. After closer inspection, I noticed more larger bits. Through about 150 kilograms of meat of various cuts and all coming along the line at a fast rate. I hit the emergency stop on the packer, as obviously there was a major problem. This meat was being taken directly to the sales floor. Apparently, the butchers didn't see it that way. After a fairly heated discussion inspection, it was quite obvious the guard of the bandsaw had migrated and was shearing off portions of teeth. There were almost full 6mm shards of tooth through a whole heap of meat, packaged and ready to be. I was expecting a manager to get called in, everything inevitably getting dumped as the pieces of metal ranged from large to specks, and us having play catch-up all day. No, the butchers wanted to go home as they had been cutting since 4 a.m., ordering us to remove it all by hand. There were hundreds of packs we had to take off the shelf, unwrapping each and inspected meticulously. Though no one could have removed it all, I shudder to think what would have happened if someone had swallowed one of those teeth. I still feel guilty. I didn't alert a manager, but the butchers were all gassed out of their mind and would threaten you with a wave of their knife if you questioned anything. I was young and stupid. So many fond memories, like did you know? If you accidentally send a bag of meat through the mincer still in the plastic bag, apparently it is cool to just mince it on a finer grind so the customer doesn't notice. Duckin' shockin' crap went on there. Story 14. It's easy to rationalize that you are just doing your job as a criminal lawyer. At first it is a little exciting, a little naughty, but you're doing your patriotic duty to defend constitutional rights. Usually it starts light. Substances users and dealers. Then maybe some assaults. It's all right. Maybe the other guy deserved it. Well, maybe not deserved it, but your client doesn't deserve years of jail for a drunken moment. Then there are the attempted and big schemes. It is hard to connect. The people seem so normal, and the dirty underbelly takes a long time to fully peel off. You get comfortable. It's a part of you. You are the conciliar. The American justice system wouldn't work without you. You become numb to the ethical issues. It is your ethical duty to help your client, after all. It is not your ethical duty to worry about the consequences of their and your actions. Then, you go home one day, and you realize that you helped a molester out of jail time, and you weep. Story 15. One of my roommates told me this story. He was working at the parking garage in Universal Studios, Florida, during the peak of summer. He got bored with his coworkers, and at the start of the day, decided to marshal every single white-colored car to the 3rd floor of the garage. By the end of the afternoon, the entire 3rd floor was a sea of white cars. The next shift was pissed as crap because they had to work extra hours since people were having a hard time finding their cars. Story 16. Worst thing I ever did, ever in my life, was when I worked at a cafe. I was running out orders and bussing tables, and I was just learning how to hold the tray properly with my left hand. So I get an order, 1 cappuccino, 1 strawberry milkshake, for a mother and her little girl. As I get to their table, I put the coffee in front of the woman, then unbalance the tray and accidentally spill the milkshake all over this 7-year-old kid. It was her birthday, and they were her new clothes and shoes. Man, even her feet were just swimming in milkshake. Horrifying. Story 17. I actually feel bad for this. When I was between 14 and 16 years old, I worked at a mom and pop supermarket. Started as bagger, then got to be a cashier, then moved up to porter, stock boy. When I started being a stock boy, one of the things I would stock was the cigarette shelf. This was the early mid-90s, so the shelves were easily accessible to everyone and constantly being filled. When I would stock the shelves, I would leave a carton or two in the big bulk boxes I was taking them out of. Then, at the end of the night, I would bring the cartons I didn't stock out to my bike or car when I got older. I would bring the cartons to school and sell them for about $20 a pop. Wound up making a cool extra $100 a week or so by doing this, which is huge for a young teenager in the mid-90s. Years later, looking back on it from my 30s, I feel bad about it. I wasn't stealing from a big corporation. I was stealing from a guy with a family and kids who ran a small business. On top of it, he was a really great guy. Hindsight. Story 18. I work at a grocery store. One of my coworkers is deaf in his left ear, and this painkillered out Git was on his left side, yelling at him to give her bags of ice from the freezer. He didn't hear her until she was yelling obscenities at him and calling him retarded. She then decided to just ask me for help. I politely obliged, already scheming as to how I was going to ruin this Git's day. She asked for 10 ducking 20-pound bags of ice, so I filled up a cart and brought it to her car. She sat her ladwhale ass down in the front seat as I loaded them into the trunk. We carry box cutters with us at work, so I decided to use mine to rip open every single bag I put in so that when she attempted to pull them out, the bags would come out but the ice would stay. She showed back up at the store in a rage, the likes of which I had never seen before. Apparently, she took a while to get home. I live in Las Vegas too, so it's super hot, and the ice melted, hit some open wiring in her crafty 2002 Ford Taurus, and completely ducked all the electronics in her car. My manager told her tough luck, and that she wasn't on our property when the damage was done. So she lost her crap, started screaming and throwing crap for like 45 minutes straight, started hitting me, then got escorted away by security. All in all, probably the most interesting day of work that I've had. Story 19. Some git came in and orders a well-done steak a minute before kitchen close. Grill was off and just been cleaned. Chucked the ducker in the deep fryer with the chips. Story 20. I worked in a facility where we tested wafers of semiconductors. For some of the wafers, the process was test on a machine, put the wafers in an oven for a period of time. Test on a machine again. Then the wafers would go out to be cut and used. The wafers would come to me, post-testing, in a plastic carrier that had 12 slots. The carrier was in a box with a latch. So I would open the box, put the carrier on a machine that would transfer the wafers from the plastic carrier to a metal one. Then the metal carrier goes in the oven. No problem. One day, my supervisor comes to me with a carrier with 3 brand new prototype wafers in it. No box. He says, "These have to go in the oven immediately." So I put them in the oven immediately. Since I didn't have the box to open, my routine was broken and I did not transfer the wafers to a metal carrier. Hey man, do you smell that? The plastic carrier melted in the oven and adhered very well to the silicon wafers, which then cracked in many places. All of this rendered the fancy new, super high priority wafers totally useless. Story 21. I once did 8 hours straight of work. No, really. I didn't Reddit or Facebook or tweet or anything, just work. My supervisor said he didn't like my attitude. Story 22. Wrote and published 2 books on company time. I was an extremely dedicated and hardworking individual in an engineering environment. I achieved 19 patents, among other accomplishments. In 1999, my son passed in a terrible accident, cold case. I was an exemplary employee through the traumatic experience. At performance review time, I received low marks as usual. The company needed to save money. When I pressed my boss for reasons for the low marks, he beat around the bush. I continued pressing. He said, "Because you had that funeral." The uncompassionate reasoning blew my mind. I decided then and there to contribute, as minimally as possible, to his success. He may have been the college-educated boss, but that did not make him the smarter of the two of us. I still miss my son. I still wish my boss minimal success when I think about how cruel people can sometimes be. Now, happily retired. Life is good. Story 23. I work at a golf course, and me and a fellow employee were digging up a sprinkler head that was installed in the ground. I had a shovel, and he was taking the dirt out with his hands. I hit his thumb. Story 24. Over the summer, I was working through my campus physics department. About 150 other students and myself were all helping to build neutrino detectors. These detectors are 54 feet by 4 feet by 3 inches and weigh just under a ton. They are stacked into stacks of around 24 that weigh about 30,000 pounds. We occasionally had to move the stacks around the factory. This was done by putting the whole thing on caster jacks and having a forklift pull it in order to fine-tune the steering and keep it from hitting walls and other stacks. We used to have teams of about half a dozen workers push and pull the stack as it was moving. The used to part is where I come in. I was the only one who noticed that the stack that was moving was about to hit another stack. I've never been known for making smart decisions when it comes to knowing my physical limits, and that day was no exception. Rather than shout at the forklift driver to stop moving, because the stacks were about to hit each other, my brain decided to be like, psh, I got this. Before I had any semblance of a plan, I had wedged myself between these two 15-ton stacks of science and tried to push. There wasn't much room at that point. I tried to shimmy my way out before crap went down. My right arm got locked in place in a bench press position between the two stacks as gap continued to close. A massive pain shot all through my arm. I screamed, half the lab factory heard that. The forklift stopped. I jumped out from between the stacks and ran, clutching my arm, before going into the fetal position about 100 feet away. The stocking manager drove me to the campus free clinic for x-rays. Luckily, nothing broke. I haven't worked there since summer ended, and apparently it is still a widely known story. I guess they use me as an example of why safety protocols that have been made were all made for a reason. Story 25, 1. Smoke some substances too. Surprise substances test at my retail pharmacy chain job the next day. 3. Freak out. Take a leak in the drain in the pop cooler so I can't produce when asked to. 4. Don't substances test. Don't test positive. Don't get fired. Great success. Story 26. Stole well over grand from coworker. I worked at Sears in college, selling large appliances, fridge, washer, dryer, etc. I was pretty damn good at it too, and would regularly be in the top 3 for sales each month. I have had a silver tongue, and I did all right. I also had a reputation for being honest, and I'd go that extra mile or two to save my customers money. This chaffed the other employees because I didn't earn the right to be there. More on that later. For the most part, we all had a mutual respect for each other. If Jane talked to a customer on Monday about a sale, and the customer came back on Tuesday but Jane wasn't there, I'd ring her up and use Jane's ID number so she'd get the sale. We were 100% commission. Well, this one guy was a complete banana. He'd been there for 25 years, worked his way up from the bottom, and was consistently the #1 salesman. See, at Sears, you don't just start in home appliances, you earn the right to be there. Most employees start as a cashier, work their way up to home and garden, which is a commission, hourly split. Then, if they are good enough, you get moved to Brand Central, Home Appliances BC. You see, that's where the money is. As a 21-year-old college student, I was averaging about $25 per hour. So it was good money, and I was only working 25 hours a week. Also, the next youngest salesperson was 45 years old. All said and done, I did not belong in that department. Well, I had delivered appliances for the 2 years prior, so I knew my stuff. So that's why I was hired straight into BC. Despite this, I was still a black sheep, and Joe, name changed, never let me forget that he didn't approve of me being there. And the guy had weight to throw around because he brought in literally 25% of the store's annual income. He did well over $1 million in sales annually. We had a massive sale coming up and we were all making leads to prep for the sale. It was going to be a very lucrative night. Well, on the day of the sale, Joe was sick, like really sick. The guy never missed a day of work, so he had to be bad to not come in. Now, because Joe had such weight, most people didn't mess with him because he could make your life a living hell. And for the people that worked with him 40 hours a week, it wasn't a battle worth fighting. As a college student who wasn't going to make a career out of this, I had no such reservation. Customers start pouring in for the sales, and most customers were kind enough to find their sales associate and get in line at their register. Since I only worked part-time, I didn't have near the amount of people waiting for me, so I was able to finish my customers in about an hour. It was still a very profitable night for me as it was, but I decided to make it even better. After I finished my sales, I began to roam the department and ask the customers what sales rep they were looking for, and I would direct them to them, unless they asked for Joe. If they asked for him, I told them that he was sick. True, and I'd be happy to take care of them for him. Also true. I'd do the sale exactly as Joe had written up, but instead of entering his number like I'd do for anyone else, I used my own. Joe had over $40,000 in sales lined up. That night, I took at least 25 of it. At an average of 4% commission, I took well over $1,000 from him. When he came in a few days and saw that his sales were half of what he expected, he flipped crap. But I'd done nothing against the code of conduct, so I was in the clear. He spent the next month trying to make my life a living hell. He would try to make me do all the for sale signs, crap like that. Every time I made an error, he'd point it out in front of customers, to which I'd respond, yeah, I've only been here a few months. A lie. I'm going to school so I don't have to do this for the next 25 years, which would turn him red with rage. I quit about 2 months later and started my banking career and never looked back. Story 27. While working at a national accounting firm of 2,000 employees, I emailed a picture of a kitten to the CEO, every partner, head honcho I knew, and my coworkers late at night. Alcohol was involved. No one ever reprimanded. I left the firm for other reasons, but from what I hear, people still talk about it. Story 28. I used to work in a small hot dog restaurant where I would have to run the place by myself. I would be the only person working there, so that means I had to make the food, do register, clean, etc. Anyways, since there was nobody else there, I could do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. After a moment of awkward silence, he says, "Someone's being naughty." Story 29. Working on a building site during the initial strip-out phase, I needed to use the toilet, went for a crap, hit the flush, and returned to the site office, only to hear yelling from downstairs. The plumber we'd contracted was standing in a puddle, holding the soil pipe he was disconnecting and had poop on him in the floor. No one had thought to put up a sign not to use the mains toilets. So basically crapped on the plumber at work. Story 30. I had to hit 2 fish with my bare hands. I work with a science communication outreach group, and we had a massive biodiversity display at our stand. This was a major countrywide event. We had some fish on display, and by the 3rd day, they were bobbing on their side. Cooling down their water and changing it made slight difference. So to spare their suffering and the worried questions of children, my supervisor made me go out back to hit them. I didn't want to smack them off a wall because there were loads of kids around. So I had to kneel in a corner like a weirdo and snap their necks. I smelled like fish for the rest of the day. Story 31. During my first deployment in Iraq, we were patrolling Lake Qadisiyah in Al-Anbar province in 4 gunboats. I was the patrol leader on the mission and noticed heavy black smoke off in the distance. So I directed the patrol to the area, and as we got closer, we saw that it was a large tent engulfed in flames, and its inhabitants were running around frantically. We got within about 30 yards of the tent, and the people were pleading to us for help. It was obviously a family of fishermen with old women, about 10 people in total. Standard operational procedures were to call HQ on the radio and get permission to put our land element on the beach. So I radioed them, and we just sat there for a good 3 minutes and waited for a reply. All while watching these desperate people pleading to us for help. We had no idea if someone was trapped in the tent. We had no idea if there were burns in need of medical care, as this was a very remote area and we had a corpsman on board. The nearest medical facility was on our base. Otherwise, they were about 3 to 4 hours away, to the nearest Iraqi hospital with no ambulance support to think of. At the very least, we could have given them some 5-gallon jugs of water and some Maries. As much as we despised Iraq and its people, seeing people desperately in need of help triggered some real human emotion in everybody. We all wanted to help. HQ finally replied with a negative on insertion, return to base. We all looked at each other, and I reluctantly gave the order for our patrol to go home. I have no idea if HQ thought it was a setup for an ambush or something, but we all knew these people needed help. So after just sitting there for 3 minutes, just looking at this frantic family, we just turned our boats and went home. I looked behind us and looked at the people on the shoreline and saw the family still pleading for help with arms extended toward us, palms skyward. We all felt like crap after that. Sometimes I wish I could go back to that day and say, "Duck you HQ," and just help that family. In a time where the mindset was winning the hearts and minds of Iraqis, I could not comprehend our headquarters' decision for us to just leave. Giving soccer balls to kids and shaking hands with people was how they wanted us to win hearts and minds, not actually helping people actively and desperately in need. This was the worst thing I've ever done at work and life. Story 32. I used to work at Kmart, and this old lady who had a mental illness always came into the store and buy a duck ton of cans of cat food. When I would ring her up, I wouldn't scan, but maybe 10 cans. She was so sweet to everyone, and Kmart's prices were way too high for everything, so I gave her free crap all the time. Story 33. I worked at the telephone center in my college, so I had to call alumni, parents, and even students, and convince them to give money to the college that already has cost them thousands in student loans and debt. After the first few weeks, the feeling of pity when I heard the sob stories of how much debt people were in and how they had no job or no family activity. I got really good at badgering people and making them feel like the school had no money and they just had to give back and help us. I've raked in about $10,000 from people who don't have the money to give. So I guess the whole job is just pretty crafty. Story 34. I dropped an X-ray tube on a full bird colonel who also happened to be the squadron commander. Pretty solid laceration. Happened about a week ago now, and we've already had 5 briefings about safety in the workplace, specifically focused on X-ray machines. Story 35. I worked as a bellboy in a pretty big hotel. I had to take luggage down from the presidential suite and help with the checkout. There are only 3 keys for the suite. You need them to unblock the elevator and to open the main door. Half an hour after the guests checked out, the reception manager asks me if I still have one of the keys. I refused because I returned my key directly after I came back. I even checked my pockets again, but there's no key. My manager then decides to call the guests and asks them about the key, even threatens them that they have to pay for it. 5 minutes later, I'm having a cigarette break, and guess what I find under my cigs? A ducking spare key to the suite. Must have taken it unconsciously. And my manager already called the guests. She would have lost me. So I never gave back the key. I just kept it and have it at home as a souvenir. Wasn't worth the trouble though. Story 36. I used to work at a Walmart distribution center. Once day we were unloading a truck full of TVs. This was pretty hard, slow work, loading them onto metal pallets. About mid-morning, my manager comes over and says, "Jafinig 1, we get paid for quantity, not quality. Unload these things faster." That day, I probably broke at least 50 TVs, throwing them from the truck onto the pallet. I kind of felt like I was sticking it to the man. Every time the pallet rail would bust through the front of the TV box, an obvious go straight through the screen. Story 37. I was working at an extremely busy gas station with a line out the door. The woman came in going right to the front asking for direction. I said I would be glad to help her, but let me get through these paying customers first. I was the only one there, and this is before Google Maps. Well, she would not stop yelling about it and interrupting. So finally, I asked where she was going. She said the name of a mall that was literally down the street. I gave her directions to another mall 20 minutes away. All the customers watched and listened to me give these wrong directions. When she was in her car driving away, the 10 or so customers I had in the store gave me a resounding applause. Story 38. I worked at Pizza Hut in high school. We had this manager who we'll call Jay. That was an absolute banana. His life was one giant power trip. One of those guys that takes his $8 per hour job way too seriously. Anyways, if you aren't familiar with Pizza Hut, they have a walk-in cooler in the back. I'd say it's about 12 feet by 12 feet, and there are about 15 racks with wheels full of dough. Fast forward to one Friday evening during rush hour, it was busy as hell. My friend made up a story that he spilled some sauce in the back of the walk-in, and he told Jay that he had no idea how to clean it up. There was just too much sauce on the floor. Jay goes into the walk-in to check it out. Turns out, there is no sauce. He's in the very back of the cooler, though. Me and my friend proceed to scramble all of the racks of dough, making a maze of racks in the way between Jay and his exit. On our way out, my friend threw a towel over the handle to the exit, which glowed in the dark, just in case someone ever got locked in there. Jay was stuck in there for at least 30 minutes. At first, you could tell he was trying to maneuver himself around the racks without knocking them over, but it was pitch black. The longer time went on, the colder he got and the more frustrated. Eventually, you could tell he was just knocking over racks from the loud crashes we heard. Once Jay made his way out, my friend got fired immediately, but somehow he didn't really notice that I was involved. He told the general manager, and I thought all hell was going to break loose, but the GM kind of blew it off. I don't think he really liked Jay either. I feel a little bad about it looking back. Story 39. I towed a car before Thanksgiving break, and the girl showed up as the tow truck was leaving, crying her eyes out because she couldn't afford to pay out the car and wouldn't be able to go home for the holidays. Story 40. Sort of a long story. Bosnia in the 90s, flying electro-optics guy, tasked to watch a Bosnian military exercise one mission. Spent most of the mission filming 72 tanks rolling across fields, Bosnian soldiers digging in, setting up mortars and machine gun nests, that sort of stuff. Middle of the mission, we were retasked to fly over watch as the US Marines took possession of a TV or radio station. I don't remember which it was. It was supposed to be very uneventful. We start dumping live video to the Marines on the ground as they settle into their task. We settled into ours, and I started watching for bad guys. An hour or so and all things on the ground are boring, and our mission commander wants to see the previous exercise footage so he can start writing his report and messages. I spin up the old footage and pipe it to him as I continue to monitor the ground. All of a sudden, I notice the Marines going ape crap. Guys are scrambling to defensive positions. They are blocking roads with APCs. It looks from the air like all hell is going to break loose, and the Marines are going to be on the front line. Bam! Our radio lights up, and the Marines are frantic to know the direction of the incoming tanks and the location of troop emplacements. I start panning all over, looking for what they seem to be seeing. Then it dawns on me. I was giving them and my mission commander the recorded feed. I had switched my video wrong. It cost me 10 cases of beer that we smuggled into country so we could deliver it to the Marines. Poor guys thought they were going to face down an entire armored division with nothing but 2 APCs and 6 Hummers as a speed bump. Story 41. I worked for Sears Auto Center for a bit after high school. I was a tech that did any oil changes, tires replacements, etc. In the stalls that were reserved for oil changes, there were these oil guns that hung from the ceiling that were connected to a 1,000-gallon drum of oil that made it easy to refill a car quickly. Anyway, one day me and a buddy were both doing an oil change on separate cars, both using a gun. He calls to me. I look over just in time to catch a full blast of oil straight to the chest. What else could I have done? I fired back. This went on for about 15 minutes. We eventually grabbed flattened cardboard boxes as shields and were shooting 5W30 all over the place, just getting drenched in the stuff. Afterwards, we went to the barrel of Super Clean to start mopping up the gallons of motor oil all over the place, to find that it was empty. Oh well, we took off. I didn't work the next day, but apparently it rained and was a nightmare. People slipping all over the place with the floor, having a thick coat of oil, and now water mixed into it. Wasn't fired. Story 42, I repair generators at power plants. These things are huge. You literally work inside of them. You have to crawl around inside the generator to get to different areas. Well, when the rotor's spinning in the stator, it creates a strong magnetic force. It's also spinning at about 3,500 revolutions per minute, and the spinning parts weighs around 20 to 120 tons. Because of this, everything we bring into the generator must be accounted for. Nothing can be left inside when we finish. Well, sometimes you bring tools and parts in and forget to check them in. I was working in the upper portion of the generator, and the ratchet I was using just happened to break. The ratcheting mechanism fell apart and clinked and clanked all the way to the bottom. Now this is a big problem. So I spent the next week searching for these parts for 12 hours a day. We obviously had to tell the engineer because we didn't want him to get ducked over. In the end, there were 2 small screws I couldn't find, and they were never recovered. After we finish these jobs, we move on to another plant. So you have no idea if anything ever went wrong. I felt terrible for this because this could cause the unit to fail. And when a generator this size fails, it's a multi-million-dollar mistake. This happened on my first job to make it worse. Incidents similar to this have happened again, and it's always a very unnerving feeling, knowing it's your fault. Also because I was new, I didn't know that common practice is to wrap the ratchet in tape to prevent this from happening. No one said anything until afterwards, of course. Story 43. I was an overnight security supervisor. I had to drive from site to site to make sure my subordinates weren't sleeping on the job. This one chick at an airport in a booth was kind of liking me. The lot that she was guarding was under construction, and no crew or anybody for that matter was around at the time. When I got there, she was knocked the duck out. I tapped on the window lightly, and this chick got startled, jumped up and face planted on the glass in the booth. She panicked when she saw it was me. I told her I was going to have to write her up. She starts flirting with me and grabs the machinery to try to get me to change my mind. We leave the booth and go further out in the parking lot, hopefully to a point where the camera inside the booth can't see us, and I put her on the security vehicle and go to town. About mid-zip, I realized the front hood of the car where we were was in the camera ring, but I was too horny and said duck it and finished up. For the rest of the night and all the next day, I was scared crapless that the client was going to review the tape and see what happened, tell my boss, and crap can my ass. My boss called me at about noon the next day. I was sweating like a maniac and scared crapless. I was going to lose my job. He asked me if I wanted to work an extra shift next Tuesday. Story 44. I worked as a busboy for a good 3 years. For the last year, I worked my entire shift with my testicles hanging out of my fly. I wear an apron, so no one ever noticed. I don't know why. Story 45. I was waiting table and going to college at the time. I had waited tables at several restaurants in town already and knew enough people that I could get a job anywhere, so I wasn't particularly worried about job security. One day I was working the outdoor patio area when one of our chefs who had just gotten off work walked past me smoking a blunt. As I had just started my shift, I knew a little green would make the next 8 hours go by, much faster. And I didn't have any tables on the patio, so I figured I was in the clear. I yelled at him, "Hey Tony, let me hit that blunt." Tony obliges, passing me said blunt. I take a long drag, hold it in, and pass the blunt back to Tony, who strolls his merry way. I turn around, facing the door from the restaurant to the patio, and exhale, slowly. A huge, billowy cloud of cannabis smoke slams into the doorway, right as a 40-something middle-class woman with her daughter walk out onto the patio. I'm scared stiff like a deer in headlights. There is zero way for me to play this off. The woman is staring right through the giant cloud of cannabis smoke directly to its source, me. In an amazing stroke of good fortune, she doesn't say a word. She simply turns around with her daughter, leaves the patio, leaves the restaurant, and drives off into the sunset. Definitely the worst thing I ever did at work. Story 46. Worked at a big box retail home improvement store. I had 5 days left before leaving for another job. I was sick of the lowlifes and holes that would come in and treat me like crap. I was very bitter and waiting for the right time. A customer came in to get a furnace filter. Instead of reading the side of it or measuring it for size, he brings the dirty, nasty filter in to compare sizes. Notoriously, when people do this, They leave the old filter on the floor or in an aisle for someone else to pick up. I helped the guy get the right filter and then shadowed him. Sure enough, he lays his old filter on a shelf in an aisle with other merchandise and headed for the cashier. I found it and went up to him at the crowded checkout. I said in a loud voice, "Sir, you dropped your dirty filter on accident. You had better keep this nasty thing to make sure you get the correct size next time. Have a good day." This thoroughly embarrassed the guy in front of 15 or 20 people. Story 47. I worked at McDonald's back in high school. We'd often mess around with the Happy Meal toys when it was slow. One day during the Teeny Beanie Baby promo, a coworker had one and was making it dance on buns while I was making sandwiches. I got an order for a plain McChicken, just a patty and bun. So I take the Beanie Baby, put it in the bun, and serve it up. We screw up orders accidentally all the time, so I thought a plain Beanie Baby sandwich would be quite hilarious. The order was for a random customer at the front counter. I didn't want to send it to the drive-thru and have someone get home or to work and realize they have an inedible sandwich. Luckily, the women who got the Beanie Baby opened it there, and even more lucky, also thought it was hilarious. The only person who didn't find it funny was my shift manager, but I never got formally reprimanded. Story 48. I'm a server, and I had this table fully of really mean women. They talked down to me the entire time and basically treated me subhuman. One of them wanted their food in a box, and while I was getting about them in the back, I accidentally threw her food out. After the other server walked away, I scooped her sandwich out of the trash and put it in a to-go container and brought it back out to her. I felt like a huge git, but I don't really regret it too terribly much. Story 49. In my second year of college, I was partying all day on Saturday. Woke up, got high, and proceeded to drink copious amounts of a drink we call Strip and Go Naked, which consists of a case of beer, a handle of vodka, and 2 frozen pink lemonade concentrates. Anyways, I got belligerent drunk. After stopping drinking around 3, I started to drink lots of water. Genius me thought it would be smart to throw up to sober up. I did so, and all that came out was water. Finally, to no avail, I went to work at 4:30, started at 5. I work at an Italian restaurant. There they gave me a plate of gnocchi, alongside tons of bread and water. Thank goodness I wasn't slated to serve that night. I sat up at the cash register, head propped up in my hands, with a glazed look in my eyes. My coworkers told me I was about to pass out, and that I like to follow around servers if I saw them after seating someone. Not my finest hour. Story 50. I worked in sales with this right git 30 years older than me. You see, she really didn't like me. A 50-year-old woman who hated that a 20-something novice came onto the scene and broke all sales records. Well, this woman was not happy at no longer being number 1. This git proceeded to make my life hell with insults every day without a drop of retaliation. Little did she know, I knew quite a bit about her personal life. One day she pushed me too far, right over the edge. I stand up in front of 12 sales guys, 23 journalists, and a managing director and scream, "Is it any ducking wonder your husband ran off with the plumber?" Cue mass hysteria and lots of tears. Said coworker then took the following 8 weeks off with depression. I felt so bad after that. Though today, I have no regrets. That's right, Susan, you deserved it. Banana. Story 51 was buzzing tables at the only nice restaurant in Spokane, Washington. Each server was responsible for buzzing their tables and piling everything up on huge trays, which we would then carry to the kitchen. One very busy Sunday brunch, I was carrying a tray filed with OJ, coffee, mimosas, just filled with half-full drinks. I am carrying the tray as carefully as I can through the main buffet area, slowly, telling everyone around me that I'm right behind them with a huge tray. Suddenly, 50-year-old woman spins around from the buffet while taking a step, right into my tray. The edge hit her right in the middle of the forehead. The next 5 seconds happen in slow motion. Tray tilts. Her eyes widen, first in shock, then in horror. I try to counterbalance, but fail. Tray tips forward. She tries to turn away, but it is far too late. The entire contents of the tray slowly slide down onto her head until the tray is empty. She was drenched from head to toe in a mixture of breakfast drinks. I grabbed the tray and rushed into the kitchen to tell the manager. Story 52. I was 18 and working at a Blockbuster Video. I took bribes and auctioned off new releases. I'd take my coworkers out to eat and pocket the rest. Once or twice, I may have copied and sold a few not yet released DVDs. In my defense, I only got paid $6.20 an hour to be a shift leader. Everyone else was making $7.50. I needed to make bills. Story 53. When I was a school bus driver, I had to take over the route of the lady who drove the doctor's kids home. They were all acting rowdy, especially this one little mean redheaded girl. She kept going back to the back of the bus and punching the high school boys in the balls and kicking some of the other older kids in the shins. crap like that. She was also one of the last kids I had to drop off. She wouldn't sit down and listen to me, so I pulled the bus over to the side of the road. Then I stood up and announced that she, yes, I said her full name, was the reason we were pulled over and were going to remain pulled over until she decided to sit the duck down and behave. Needless to say, the other kids managed to convince her to listen to me, and I never had another problem out of her after that. Story 54. When I was a senior in high school, I worked at Arby's part-time. For the rest of the order, that was all I was staring at even while talking to her mother. I know this isn't a terrible crime or anything of that nature, but I have always felt like a huge pervert for doing that. Story 55. Used to work at a golf course in college. It was tournament day, and I was stocking ice in the tents around the course. It was towards the end of the day, and I was getting careless. 12 straight hours worked. I was putting giant bags of ice on a golf cart to take to the drink tents. I stacked a couple in the front seat next to me. I put one too many and walked away for one more, trying to see how many I could get on at a time. As soon as I turn around, bang, whoosh. I spin to see that a bag of ice had fallen off my seat and right onto the gas pedal. The ice cart zoomed directly up a hill, through a flimsy wooden fence, and right into a parked car in the parking lot, upside down. Oops. I didn't get fired, surprisingly. Didn't even make me pay for damages. Story 56. Worked as a bartender for years. Two of the hotter girls that I worked with that had the night off came in a little tipsy and had a few drinks. They both went to the bathroom, and before they went in, motioned me to come over. They took me into the men's handicapped stall and double-teamed me. To this day, the coolest thing to ever happen to me spontaneously. Definitely the worst and best thing I've ever done at work. Story 57. My first job was as a dishwasher at a small cafe. One morning, a huge container of glop was sitting on my work area. I worked around it and cleaned and dried everything I could. An hour went by. I ignored the thing for as long as I could. Finally, I had to deal with it. So I set all the gray mush into the sink and scoured and polished the stupid thing. Only then did the owner bustle in and say, "Where's the soup?" I was embarrassed. The owner was mad. There was no soup du jour, but nobody tried storing food in the to-be-washed section ever again. Story 58. I worked at a restaurant for a few years, and one Monday morning, the owner comes to me and tells me the cleaning crew had not been emptying the sanitary disposal boxes in the women's bathroom. So guess who he told to do it? Yours truly. I wish that was the worst part. Well, not only had the cleaners not put paper bags in the boxes, they were all completely full after a week of not being emptied, and they did not detach from the stall walls. So basically, I had to stick my hand in all the boxes, all 8 of them, and grab the used tampons and pads with just rubber gloves on. There were tears in my eyes as bloody pads got stuck to my rubber gloves. This memory will forever be scarred into my brain. Story 59. I used to work in a restaurant that had this reward card program. A fellow server and I started signing up fake cards by registering them with email accounts we had created. Whenever we would get a cash table, we would swipe the card after the table left and pocket the 20 out of 40 yen or $60 discount. A few times a night, 5 days a week, over about a year, thousands of dollars. We kept trading cards with each other and we had enough that no one caught on. When I got my big girl job, I passed the cards down to a couple other servers. A few months later, the owner found out and prosecuted the 3 servers who were caught with the cards. They each had to pay a $2,000 fine and do community service. Story 60. Got absolutely crap-faced on a very, very slow shift in the coat check one night. 5 hours and a bottle of whiskey into my shift, I decided it was time to go home. Grabbed the coat of a customer, put it on, and ducking, walked home where I passed out for a solid 10 hours. I woke up to 20-something missed calls and to several, gradually becoming more hateful. Text from my boss. The jacket contained car keys, ID, money, cell phone, everything. It was pure dumb luck that the guy was living close by and had flatmates to let him in and didn't have to work the next day. Story 61. I was working as a regional airline pilot and was occasionally hooking up with a gate agent in a remote city in the Midwest. We were in the south and flying to Chicago O'Hare with numerous thunderstorms in the vicinity between Peoria and Chicago. I purposely did not take extra fuel and ensured that our reroute would take us over my friend's city. Of course we diverted, and I told the co-pilot, first officer, to get the flight deck ready and get the plane ready for our subsequent flight. I knew that it was the afternoon, and this small airport was empty. I went inside for a quickie and continued the flight to O'Hara. I think it cost the company over 10 grand for my 10-minute pick-me-up. Story 62. I used to work on an assembly line next to a complete a-hole. He was obnoxious, and everyone hated his guts. He liked to sabotage the workstations to make you look bad, and all of the girls especially hated him because he was overly aggressive toward them. One day, I made sure to work upstream of him because the next person down the line from you is responsible for checking your work. I made 4 defective parts in a row because we were allowed 5 defects, month before getting fired. The supervisor seized the opportunity to fire his ass, and he didn't even talk to me about the defects. Everyone loved it, but I kind of felt bad afterwards because I saw him crying on the way out.